The horrible parents that allowed their pet snake to eat their toddler. Jaren and her boyfriend Charles lived in Florida with Jaren's 2-year-old daughter Cheyenne. Living in the home was also an 8.5-foot Burmese python that lived in an aquarium in the living room, secured only by a safety pinned quilt that worked as a lid. This particular breed of snakes is known in the wild to be so strong they can kill alligators. But yeah, just put a blanket on top of its cage, that'll be fine. Obviously, no. This python would escape from its cage constantly. Reportedly, it escaped over 10 times in the span of like 1 month. This ginormous 8.5-foot, super aggressive python escaping all the time. A concerned family member even offered to buy a proper cage for their pet snake, but Jaren and Charles refused the offer. The Department of Children and Families, DCF, received reports that this was not a household safe for children, that Jaren and Charles were using multiple illegal substances in the same home as 2-year-old Cheyenne. They even admitted to using these substances and said they had no intention of stopping. So the child welfare agent that went to their home saw that there were parents using illegal substances, and a lot of illegal substances, and had no intention of stopping, that there was a ginormous snake that was constantly escaping, and a little 2-year-old toddler in the home on top of that, and still thought it was a safe space for 2-year-old Cheyenne, and closed the investigation. And within 2 weeks of them closing the investigation, 2-year-old Cheyenne would be dead. On June 31st, 2009, after Jaren and Charles were passed out after taking substances, the python escaped its enclosure once again and made its way into Cheyenne's nursery and into her crib. The snake wrapped itself around the baby's body and slowly squeezed the life out of her. I can't even imagine the pain and the terror that this little girl was enduring. I'm sure that she was screaming out for her mommy to come out and save her, but her mother was too high to know. Cheyenne's dead body was discovered by Charles late the next morning after 10 a.m. The python was still wrapped around her body. There were bite marks covering her body, and the snake was trying to eat her. Charles says that he slammed the snake's body on the floor, repeatedly stabbed it before calling 911.
Okay, and what's the problem? Tell me exactly what happened.
Our snake, we have a Burmese python, and she's about 12 foot long. She got out of the cage last night and got into the baby's crib and strangled her to death.
Okay, stay on the line, please.
The snake did survive the stabbing and was relocated. The snake was severely malnourished. She was only 13 pounds when she should have been 150 pounds. Just let that sink in for a second. This was a wild, strong animal, aggressive animal that was being starved to death. That was also not being secured properly, and they were surprised that this was the outcome. It is a tragedy that because of so many people's stupidity, a 2-year-old had to pay for it with her life. Jaren and Charles were both convicted of aggravated manslaughter, sentenced to 12 years in prison, and both released in 2021. And as for the child welfare agency that said that this was a safe household for children, they went on record saying they acknowledge flaws in how the case was handled, but have concluded Cheyenne's death could not be prevented. That is such a cop-out, and honestly so disgusting and disrespectful to say, but sadly it's not surprising. Systems like CPS and DCF are so insanely flawed, and sadly it's the children that have to pay for it and suffer for it. But that's a whole other video on its own. Sadly, we could talk about that 4 hours. Recently, we've been doing a lot of videos on the dangers of people having wild animals as pets, and I'll be the first one to admit that there's a lot of people that have snakes and other reptiles and do it in a safe way for humans and for the animals itself. But this is such a clear example of people that didn't do it in the right way, and an innocent child had to pay for it with her life. That should not have to happen. There needs to be more systems in place to prevent this from happening, and I know I'm not asking for too much. If you're still liking the videos we've been doing on when keeping wild animals as pets have gone terribly, terribly wrong, let me know in the comments and let me know what other case suggestions you'd want to see next. Until then, I love you guys so much and I'll see you tomorrow.